I tell my students all the time that they're here to study filmmaking, but actually 99% of filmmaking is problem solving. What I didn't get taught at film school was that, they teach you how to operate a camera, they teach you about lighting, they teach you how to tell stories. What they don't tell you is that when you graduate and you just sat there waiting for the phone to ring and it doesn't ring, what do you do? And what I learned over time was that
Luke Blazejewski is an award-winning filmmaker, camera operator, and editor whose work spans broadcast TV, documentary, short-form video, and digital storytelling. Based between Manchester and the Peak District, his clients include Leica, ITV, NHS, RSPB, and the Wildlife Trust, using film as a powerful tool to capture the stories of people, places, and our connection to nature. He also works as a lecturer at the University of Salford, shaping the next generation of filmmakers. And when he's not behind the camera, you just might catch him scaling cliffs as a passionate rock climber. I'm so excited to dive into his story and creative journey. Thank you for being here, Luke.
you have done your research. I'm very impressed. Very impressed. Thank you. Such a nice introduction.
You're welcome. How have you been today?
I'm doing okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm doing okay. We're in autumn now, end of summer. Summer is over, and it's been quite a busy spring and summer period for me this year. So I'm enjoying the change of pace and enjoying watching the natural world move into its next cycle.
Nice. Well, you say in your on your website that you're based between Manchester and the Peak District. What does that mean?
On one level, it means where I live, living in Mossley, right on the edge of the peaks and not too far from Manchester City. But also I think it spans into my sort of professional and personal life as well. I spend a lot of time filming the natural world and trying to tell stories about the natural world and encourage people to engage with nature. I also spend a lot of time rock climbing in the Peak District, and exploring and trail running up there and sort of connecting with the landscape. So very much see my life split between the sort of the opportunities and the busyness of the city, but also the more peaceful nature of the natural world in the Peak District.
Right. Well, talking about the opportunities in the city, how did you get how did you start getting contracts or working with all these corporations, organizations in the city centre?
Yeah, that question is something that I talk to my students at Salford University about all the time, and there's no linear path to it at all. I think if you had 100 freelancers here today, they'd all tell you a different story. What I didn't get taught at film school was that, they teach you how to operate a camera, they teach you about lighting, they teach you how to tell stories. What they don't tell you is that when you graduate and you just sat there waiting for the phone to ring and it doesn't ring, what do you do? And what I learned over time was that it's a cliche, but it very much is. It's not always what you know, it's who you know. And to build on that, it's more about the kind of network that you develop over the years and the word of mouth that gets passed around, and the associations and relationships that you build with people really is everything that you've got as a sole trader. What you want to do when you set out is get into people's minds a little bit. You want to be the person they think of when they want to commission a painting, commission a mural, make a video, make a film, write some music, do an art project.
How do you do that?
It is a combination of, these days, social media. Obviously, I think it's unavoidable. When I started out, social media was a bit different. I'm not that old. It was around, but maybe it wasn't quite as sort of pervasive as it is today. I just attended events, and this is where sort of the Manchester side of things comes in. There's a lot of stuff that happens in Mossley and the surrounding towns, but Manchester, you can go to the city every night and find an event, find an exhibition launch, an event in the library, the museums, the art galleries, and you go there and you see familiar faces, but you also see different faces. You get talking to people. You say, I'm a photographer, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a painter, whatever it is. This is what I'm excited about. This is what I'm passionate about. And just get into their head. So at some point, you never know who you're talking to. And hopefully when that opportunity comes, You know, you'll be the first person on the list. The way I always think about it is that you want to try and make people's life as easy as possible. When, let's say, there's somebody in an office and they've got some money and they need to commission an artwork or a project or whatever it might be, they don't want to spend the whole day Googling for people. They want someone who's conveniently in their head at the top of their list going, oh yeah, they'll probably do it. Job done. That's a tick off my list, you know? And that's not always about being the best. It's not always about being the person with the most resources, the most money, the best equipment, whatever it might be. You're being in the right place at the right time to make an impact on someone.
That's really interesting. So do you think the creatives in smaller towns like Mossley have the same access as opposed to people in the city center? Do you think they have the same access to these networks?
Probably not on their doorstep to such a high quantity, but it's a different kind of it's a different kind of space. I mean, when you live in the smaller towns, there's fewer people, you get to know everybody. You develop deeper relationships, you know, you get to know everyone who's involved in the sector. There were some lovely places in Mossley like the Vale. They're becoming sort of the heartbeat of the artistic community in these towns, which are bringing people together and creating these communities. So on level, you might have a smaller community, but it's probably more tight-knit. In the city, bigger communities, but lots of fragmented pockets.
Well, tell me about your journey into film.
I first got a camera when I was about 14 years old, 14, 15. My mom bought me one as a complete and utter, I think she just had no idea of what to get me for my birthday. She bought me this very small, modest, little pocketable camera. It was probably one of the first sort of small digital cameras at the time. And she didn't know if I was going to take to it. I hadn't mentioned anything about photography, but I like going outdoors. And so I started taking it with me, and I just became obsessed with the mindfulness of it and zooming in on things. And sort of not to skip ahead too far into the future, but I think what I didn't realize at the time was how mindful that practice was going to be for me as someone sort of who later in life struggled with mental health conditions in my 20s. I didn't realize that in those early days of picking up a camera, that was my first introduction to sort of mindfulness and engagement with moments in the natural world. And that started to grow into an artistic curiosity as well. And the easiest answer to the question is I went to college to study photography and film. Film was the only thing that I got good grades in. And so I was like, okay, I must be able to do this.
That's where your interest was.
I sucked at English, I sucked at media, and art, but film I was doing okay in. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll go and study this at university. I was lucky enough to go to university, so managed to get a place and then followed it from there, really.
Nice.
But the sort of broader answer to your question about the natural world came when I moved up to Salford. I moved up to Salford in 2008 to do my master's. And I moved to near the university. I was in student halls living next to the River Irwell. And in my spare time, I'd take my camera out to walk up and down the River Irwell. And I was amazed at how much wildlife was around on the banks. Wildflowers, birds, mammals, plants, all this wonderful stuff. Started taking photographs of it. And when I would meet people from Salford, I would say, aren't we so lucky to live here? Got this beautiful river, these beautiful parks. And these people would like give me these strange looks. Like, why are you saying that? Like, what are you talking about? The river isn't a nice place to go. You don't walk along the river for fun. And I couldn't quite understand why I was having this experience and these other people weren't sharing my opinions about it. So I did a little bit of digging and found, went back to the Industrial Revolution when Salford and Manchester were very different. They were we had lots of mills, chimneys, factories, dirt, smog, busyness. And the river was something that was becoming more and more polluted. And the waters were getting poisoned. The fish were dying, the birds were dying, because the river was being used by the city to trade with Liverpool and the world to get the cotton in and out of the city.
Right. So they had a different relationship to the river.
They had an economic relationship with the river. Yeah. It was giving them all these kind of things, and they were taking, and the river was effectively dying. And it wasn't until the 70s, the 80s, 1980s, the river started to get cleaned up again. The fish came back, the birds came back, and the wildlife came back. And then I came and started to appreciate it. But what I found interesting was that people's perceptions of the river were still 100 years out of date.
Not changed at all. No.
Not changed at all, even though reality had changed. And I found that premise quite interesting for art. And I started making short films about the river, people's relationship, to try and challenge that perception. And then my interest with making films about the natural world grew out of there, really.
Right. That's really interesting. Your work spans across broadcast TV, documentaries, short films. Do you have a different approach to each of these genres or each of these jobs? How do you approach them?
That's a very good question, and it is different every single time. I suppose you could sort of break down my work into two very broad categories of sort of commercial and more sort of artistic work. As a documentary filmmaker, I like to make my own short documentaries about issues that interest me. And then there's the sort of commercial side, which, unfortunately pays the bills, but can take you to some very interesting places and meet very interesting people along the way. On one hand, you've got a lot of control. You might be writing your own script, researching your own ideas, sourcing your own funding for documentaries. And then the other side of things, you've got more of a commercial side where you, the client, are asking me to do a very specific thing. And there is some creative negotiation, but ultimately you've got a deliverable and I have to deliver it. Just make it sound, unfortunately, as corporate as it can be sometimes. But so the level of creativity differs. And with the level of creativity differing, sometimes in my documentaries, I have a colleague who works for the RSPB as a camera operator, and we make films together. So we will team up as a creative sort of duo and make our films together. So that's a different process because you are collaborating, developing with another person. You have disagreements, you have agreements. It opens some doors. You have good days, you have bad days. The commercial stuff is more of a solo operation. And so the experience of these kind of projects differ as well. It's very nice to have, on the documentaries, it's very nice to have another person there for all of the pragmatic, problematic, logistical stuff. When you're working on your own, you do shoulder a lot of responsibility. And I think a lot of artists or sole traders, freelancers who might listen to this podcast will sort of empathize with that. Sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit or enough support to say, we are actually shouldering a lot of stuff on our own.
Yes, and it's really good because one thing that you did mention in the beginning was about getting connected with people and knowing people, basically. And it's not what you know, it's who you know. And a lot of creatives, not by choice all the time, but by practice, operate on their own. So we tend to focus so much on practicing our skills and sharpening our skills, which is super important. But then at the end of the day, we need to get connected with people to, put food on the table. It's some really interesting points you've made over there.
I think as well, just to build on what you just said, one of the things I wasn't told at university was that your relationship with art changes as you get older. Like what we were talking about earlier. When you are 21, 18, whatever, and you might be living at home, or maybe you've got, you don't have children or whatever it might be, you don't have responsibilities. And you've got all the time to be introspective, to reflect on yourself, your childhood, your upbringing, your interests, your loves, your hates, your heartbreaks, whatever it might be, all this stuff that inspires you. And then, like you said, eventually, over time, you have rent to pay, you've got bills to pay, maybe you've got a child, maybe you've got two, maybe you've got a mortgage, maybe you've got a partner, maybe you've got a family member that needs support. And all of these things, all of a sudden, you have to, the choices that we make become more complicated and sometimes leave less room for that artistic practice. And then that can impact our own mental health and all that kind of stuff as well. So it's funny because I think people who aren't in it just see that phase of when you're, in your early 20s and you've got, no worries in the world. Are artists, they're just there in their studio, just doing their stuff and, loving life and all that kind of stuff. But it changes, I think.
Do you find that in your pursuit for not perfection, but say in whatever project that you're tackling, there's that gap between the start of the project and the end of the project, and you put your head down in your tunnel vision, grinding towards that goal, and in the interim, you don't really feel any sense of joy until the job is done? Do you feel that?
Yes. I gave up on perfection a long time ago. I think when in my early days, I thought maybe that could be achievable, and over time, I think I've realised that perfection isn't actually perfection. It's the process that you go through, and the result, and coming out the other side, and all the learnings that you've made along the way. With wildlife filmmaking, everything goes wrong. You know, it rains, the animal doesn't turn up. You spend a lot of time, you spend hours waiting for something that never happens.
Right.
Or maybe you're in one spot and the animal turns up in the wrong spot, over and over and over again. So you get used to failure. You get used to...
That's really interesting.
Yeah, you get used to failure. It doesn't get easier to process necessarily. You get more used to it, but you still have your bad days when you think, what am I doing? I could just throw my camera in the bin and go and get a job as an accountant. You know, why am I doing this? And then, you know, you go to bed and you come back, you look at your footage and go, oh, no, actually, I know why I do it.
Yeah. Well, to jump off that, what's the most challenging project that you've ever handled?
One of the most challenging projects I've ever handled, I think, was making this documentary about bird migration in Georgia a few years ago with my friend. I say a few years ago, it was about 9 years ago, so we were a bit less experienced, but we were ambitious, and we'd found this story in Georgia in the mountains where every autumn, this time of year, they get 1 million birds of prey that come down through this little valley in the mountains in Georgia, because they're migrating from sort of Russia, Northern Europe, all the way down to Africa. And in the spring, they come the other way. So in the autumn, they all get forced south. And as they leave Russia and fly over Northern Europe and come down into Georgia, they get forced because of the mountain range into this little bottleneck, very small part of the mountains near the sea, where basically, rather than having a massive space, there's this little valley where 1 million birds gets forced through. So you can stand there, watch all these birds come through, and it's an amazing natural spectacle. Right. We found out about this story that the migration obviously has been happening for thousands of years, but it's only really been noticed to science for the last 10 years. Okay. So it was new, and no one had made a film about it. So we contacted the organization. We made a plan. We were going to go out there for 3 or 4 weeks to make this documentary. And they said, yeah, you come at this time, the migration will be happening. It'll be amazing. And so we turn up, and the first day we walk up to the top of the mountain at 4 o'clock in the morning, and we wait, and we spend about 15 hours on top of the mountain, and there's no birds. No birds appear.
15 hours?
15 hours. So we're like, okay, bad luck. It happens sometimes. So we come up the next day, no birds. And they're like, oh, that's weird. Like the day before you arrived, they were everywhere. Come up to the third day, no birds. Fourth day, 1 bird.
You should ask him where you're playing at. And then what you mean?
And then fifth day, no birds. And they were like, and the people on the ground said, don't know what to say. We've never seen this before. When you're in wildlife films, there's any wildlife photographers listening, I'm sure they will agree. The amount of times you hear, I've never seen this before. Like, you should have been here yesterday. They were everywhere. You hear that all the time. So 5 days in, no birds. And we were starting to get panicky. And on the 6th day, we were staying with this Georgian family. Yeah. And there was this, the mother of the family, she was lovely. None of them could speak any English. We couldn't speak any Georgian. Yeah. And so we were just sort of communicating, but we got by. And she got the sense that things weren't going very well. Yeah. So on the 6th day, we woke up at like 4 a.m. and she gave us our sandwiches. Yeah. And she gave us this homemade bottle of wine. It's like, I know things are difficult. Here's this bottle of wine. And we were like, it's 4 a.m. Like, I can't do anything with this. But we took it up to the mountain. And we got to the top of the mountain. We waited. It got to about 10 o'clock in the morning and there was still no bird. Yeah. Being up there for about 5 hours. Just at that time, this news crew came up because the Georgian TV were coming up that day to make a piece about the birds and the organization.
Yeah.
They come up, we see them come up, and they set up and they start interviewing everyone.
Yeah.
And we're looking around, and there's no birds. It's terrible. And my friend Nick looks at his watch and says, "Should we open the wine?" And I'm like, "It's 10:30. It's 10:30 now. Like, it's 10:30, Nick. I think it's a bit early for wine." He's like, "Oh, come on, it'll be okay. Let's just open the wine." So we opened the wine, drank the wine, waited. No birds came, and we went down. We went home. Then later that night, we went to the base camp where everyone was in that evening to watch the news piece come out, and all the organization leads were being interviewed on TV, and they were talking about the project. And then all of a sudden, just behind them, I wander into the back of the shop, completely unknown, with a bottle of wine, drinking it out of the bottle at 10:30 in the morning, and absolutely horrified. And then the next day, I get an email from my mom saying, "Hi, Luke. I don't know if you realise, but you're on Georgian TV yesterday, drinking a bottle of Coke." And I said, "Yes, Mom. Yes, that's what I was doing. I was drinking a bottle of Coke."
So funny.
So the reason why that was difficult was, it was being patient, believing that, the birds are going to come, but also when you're in a place for a certain amount of time, you have that anxiety of, well, you can't waste time. So if I'm just standing here and the birds aren't coming, how else do I spend my time productively as a documentary filmmaker? And so we had to make a lot of last minute changes, decisions, responses, reactions to make sure that we're being productive. So when the birds did arrive, we could focus on the birds. And they did, after a week, they did eventually arrive.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think that's the thing with art. It never goes the way that you...
No, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. That's such a crazy story.
And to counteract that with how well it can go sometimes. So last year I did a shoot in Zambia in Africa, and compared to that...
Oh, Zambia. I need to go to Zambia. It's nice.
It was beautiful. Yeah. I mean, I've only been, I've been to South Africa, Namibia, and Zambia. So there's a whole bit of Africa I haven't been to. But Namibia is very special because it's just so, it's just such a big desert, sort of very unusual landscape to what I'm used to. And then Zambia is that sort of classic, to me, that sort of classic African plain, sort of bush-like landscape. But in a different way, we've got cars, we've got guides, we tell them what we want to see, they drive us to the animal. Very easy, very nice.
That's nice
compared to Georgia.
So, how did the Namibia one go then?
Namibia, we were making a shoot about cheetah conservation there. That was a while ago. That was probably about 10 years ago or a bit longer. And we went over there to work with a few different conservation organizations on the ground that were just working specifically on cheetah conservation. That was my first time to Africa, so that was amazing.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. From what you're telling me, it just seems like filmmaking builds a lot of resilience in you, because you can't just say, well, it didn't go so well, so I'm not going to pick up a camera again, and I'm not going to do wildlife photography or videography anymore because I had a terrible day and it rained. You pick your camera up the next day, go back in, the next day, go back in, regardless of the results you get. And that's something that is really, really commendable, because it takes a lot of mental fortitude to actually do something like that.
I tell my students all the time that they're here to study filmmaking, but actually 99% of filmmaking is problem solving. 1% of it is filmmaking. Because you learn how to push the buttons and do the lighting and all that kind of stuff. But when, if you go out to film someone, they'll be late, or it's raining, or it's windy, or they've got a cold, or, I don't know, something else has gone wrong. Something always goes wrong. On every single shoot of my life, something goes wrong.
Something goes wrong.
And you have to adapt. You have to respond. There's no such thing as a perfect film shoot.
That's really
so.
Good.
On one hand, it instills a pessimism in you, which is that everything is always going to go wrong. But also, it gives you those life skills.
It gives you the life skills to be ready for it.
Yeah.
So that's good. It's really good. You've got a PhD in ecology. How does the landscape in Mossley and Manchester, those two different landscapes, how do those two landscapes inspire you or inform your work?
I think it's that post-industrial aspect. So when we talk about Manchester, we talk about the sort of one of the hearts of the Industrial Revolution and how that city has changed. When we think about cities, we don't think about nature, biodiversity all the time, but they are actually home to a wealth of different kinds of species. When we come out a little bit further into towns like Mossley, Uppermill, Greenfield, they are bordering the countryside and they are much more rural than Manchester City is, but they still have that post-industrial heritage of the mills here, the factory workers, the landscape that has been shaped by industry. And I find that interesting, particularly in the north of England and the Midlands, which is where I'm from. This sort of community of networks that were incredibly industrial in their heyday changed the landscape for a long time and now slowly are almost changing back to be reconnected with the natural world. I find that very interesting, particularly as well because of the amount of people that live in these landscapes. I think they're a good opportunity to reconnect people with nature. And off the back of that, hopefully inspire lots of different kinds of positive traits like an awareness of environmental issues, maybe behavior change, awareness around climate change, you know, and inspiring people to live a little bit more sustainably, like all of these sort of byproducts of just having a bit more of a connection with nature.
Outside of work, what inspires you creatively?
No one's ever asked me that question before. Outside of work, you know, it's so hard. I find that when you work in art, in the art, I find that kind of question really difficult because
your life is your work.
To some respect,
I know your work gives you a lot of joy. That's why you do it. But outside of that, is there anything else that, you know, inspires you?
I like to think of myself as quite an active person. So alongside my film work, which I do spend a lot of time thinking about, and I think that's the trick with art, is that we don't finish at 5 p.m.
No.
And so at what point do you sort of go, right, I'm not thinking about work anymore, I'm switching off. That switch is harder to define. But the things that I do really like and get me out of bed outside of work are trail running over the moors, which is one of the reasons why I moved out here. It's just I'm lucky enough that at the end of my street I can just leave the roads behind and just be on the trails for as long as I want and just have all of my thoughts to myself, running along the river, the canal, up over the moors, the reservoirs. And also rock climbing gives me a lot of motivation. A sport that I discovered maybe about 8-9 years ago and has sort of captivated me really and taken me to some of the most beautiful places in the UK that I've ever seen.
That's interesting. How did you get into rock climbing?
I had a friend who sort of invited me out one day, just said, you know, we were friends for other reasons, but he said, you know, do you want to come out and do this thing that I do? Try it. And I think from that moment, I just sort of fell in love with it. And over the last 9-10 years I've been doing it, I've often found that is the case with people I bring to the sport as well. Because it's quite, I don't see it as an extreme sport, but I imagine
I'm scared of heights.
A lot of people, a lot of people might. And so I think people have that polarized, like, they're either curious to it or no way in hell will you ever get me to do something like that. And so when you bring someone to it and try it for the first time, they tend to either love it or hate it. They'll be like, oh, that was terrifying, never want to do it again. Or, oh, wow, that was the most amazing experience. The reason why I like it, and this comes back to the mindfulness, is that when you are trail running or when you are rock climbing and you're out in the natural world and you are so focused in on the micro movements of your body and your balance, and you're on your feet, you're on your hands, you don't think about anything else. Everything switches off. And there's not many things in life that give me that. I've tried meditation, and maybe I should have just tried harder, but it never quite worked for me. I've tried other kind of mindful practices, and maybe my brain is just a bit impatient for them. But with something like rock climbing, it just, to some degree, your safety in some cases is reliant on that focus. And so you really go into that focus.
You're really hyper focused.
You don't hear anything.
You can't get distracted.
You can't get distracted. And even though that might sound like a ridiculous position to put yourself into some people. And I understand why it might sound like that, but nevertheless, it works, and you just completely zone out. And it's wonderful when you're in that moment, completely connected to yourself and engaged with yourself, that I don't get in my day-to-day life.
Do you think that getting into rock climbing has brought a different focus to your filmmaking?
Maybe it probably has allowed me to focus in on subjects a little bit more. Mm-hmm. I think the more you develop mindful practices, whatever they might be, you sort of are developing a broader system within yourself that allows you to just sort of really focus in on particular moments, whether that be work related, personal related, whatever they might be. And I think doing that over and over again in a sport like rock climbing is fine-tuning that ability to be patient and focus in on those sort of like smaller details. And sometimes filmmaking is all about those smaller details, for sure.
Yeah. Because I've seen your work and it's amazing, by the way.
Thank you.
I've seen how you focus on animals, little insects, butterflies, and you capture them in such an amazing way that you get to truly feel the essence of the subjects that you're looking at. It's so interesting. I was watching that short film you made, Pearls, and I just loved the composition of it, the color grading, everything, from the aerial shots to the zoomed in shots of the butterfly, and how you structured the whole documentary was really good. So.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoyed making that short film, because one of my sort of passions that I don't get to explore in film very much is butterflies. It's one of my favorite sort of family of species, just because I think they're magical. And I'm always fascinated when I meet people who say they don't like butterflies or they're scared of butterflies, because I don't understand how it's physically
do they exist? People don't like butterflies.
Some people are scared of them. I've been told, they said they're terrified of them. I think because they flap and they're frenetic, and they don't like that sort of movement. But I'm like,
stop being so jumpy.
Have you ever stopped and just looked at them? And when I first discovered the pearl-bordered fritillary up on that site near Silverdale in the northwest, and it's one of the last strongholds of them in England, and the whole story about their decline and how they're sort of being protected in that little nature reserve. I just thought it was such a wonderful, positive story about interesting people doing inspiring things for a beautiful animal that 99% of people will never hear about. Because until I watched that documentary you made, I had never heard about them. So it was very, very informative and eye-opening for me. And this is a species of butterfly, they come out in sort of summer. They're around for like 3 weeks and then they go, and that's it. And then they're gone again. And they lay their eggs, of course, and they have to sort of survive the winter to come back out again. But this whole story is revolved around just like a few weeks of time. People put all this effort in, this time, all this pain, just to protect a species that they only really get to see for a few weeks a year, and then they're gone again. And like, isn't that wonderful that people have that goodness in them?
Yes,
that they want to do that.
That's truly amazing and truly inspiring. What advice would you give to someone who wants to break into filmmaking today?
I have this question from my students all the time in Salford. I think the number one piece of advice for someone who wants to break into filmmaking at the moment is to explore and experiment with all the different kinds of production that are available right now, rather than worrying about specializing early on. Because unfortunately, I'll start with the sort of the bad news and then move on to the hope. But so the film industry at the moment is going through a bit of a challenging phase. And we are still producing, 20, 30, 40,000 film students in this country every year through the universities. So that's just the university graduates. There are also people going in via apprenticeships and other ways as well. So the competition has never been higher. The cost of equipment has never been lower. So on one hand, yes, you can buy great equipment. You can make amazing content that, could be shown in a cinema for like £2,000. You can buy an amazing camera system. I know that's a lot of money for people, but it's better than £100,000 that it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So a lot cheaper. But that means obviously a lot of people have got the good gear. so it gets more competitive. But there is the positive bit is that because of the way that we live now in a bit more of a content sort of consuming age through social media, through television, through cinema, through whatever it might be, there are more eyeballs in the world wanting to look at stuff than there ever has been in the history of the world as well. So the competition is high, but the audience has never been bigger. So I think the best possible thing you can do is just go out there and produce stuff and put it out on as many platforms as you possibly can. Try and reach as many people as possible. I really sort of stand by that idea that you don't need to be the best. You need to work hard and you need to understand your craft. But I'm not the best cinematographer in the world. You know, I'm certainly not the best wildlife or natural history filmmaker in the world at all. But you put the time in, you find your niche, whether it be stories about the natural world in cities and post-industrial landscapes, like I sort of discovered, whatever it might be, try to position yourself within your niche rather than just being a filmmaker of everything, because you can't really be that. You certainly can't be that at the beginning of your career. And look at all these different platforms like YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it might be. Okay, a lot of us don't like social media, but there's a lot of people on there that are looking for interesting stories. And one of the positive things about social media is that people don't have attention spans. But the reason why that's positive is because it means you haven't got to go out there and make a 2-hour documentary every month. You've got to make a 30-second piece, a 1-minute piece, maybe a 2-minute piece. You know, it's manageable. You know, try and just make something. Try and make a little 30-second piece every 2 weeks. Consistency, I would say, is better than quality. I think when you look at the success stories of most people in the world, whether it be TV presenters, singers, musicians, artists, whatever it might be, very few of them made one amazing piece of work and then their life took off. They made consistent pieces of work, built up a following, built up an audience, which then got them noticed, which then maybe got them more money, more funding, more resources, more opportunity to make more stuff. And then they built up and went from there. Very few people hit the jackpot and then make it instantly. Less than 1%, I imagine. So consistency is the key.
That's really powerful. And, I know a lot of people in this day and age of the internet are not posting. Creatives I'm talking about, I'm not posting, and it's because of these things that you've mentioned. They feel like, oh, it's not there yet. They want to be perfect at whatever they are doing. They want to have the right gear. What I'm seeing on my feed, the camera quality is like this. Mine is not there yet. So they then go into a state of paralysis where they are not posting because of the fear of judgment, like, oh, people will see it's not good enough and all that. I think I just linked it back to what you were telling me about life of a filmmaker, where nothing goes perfect, but every day is a learning curve, and you learn from all the failures, all the mistakes, and you grow from there.
I think if you spend too much time dwelling on, if I only had better equipment, I'd make better films or whatever it might be. If I had a better paintbrush, I'd do this differently. Because that, I think, is more of what that process is in your mind psychologically. That's got nothing to do with the camera. What you're doing there is cultivating a mindset of inactivity and a fear of trying, because you've got a fear of failure. Because today you might say, if only I had a better camera, I'd do it. So I might come along and say, well, here's a better camera, and because you've started to cultivate that mindset, you might say, but the weather's not very good today.
No,
I'll wait until it's sunny.
Or I don't have the lighting.
I don't have the lighting, or I don't quite have the microphone now, so I'll just wait until I've got the microphone and then it'll be better. It's like, no, just start now. Because the more you do, the more you'll learn. And people like consistency. When you look at all your favorite artists, whether it be painters, musicians, filmmakers, whatever it be, you probably don't like every single thing they've ever made.
No, that's true.
You don't. True, but you've got respect for it because they were consistent. You've got your favorite film, favorite music, whatever it might be, and then you've got that album that you don't quite like. But you're glad they made it because it led on to all the other things. And so that's just what this is.
That's really good. That's really, really good. What piece of kit or equipment can you not live without?
I'd probably say now, just because I'm in a fortunate position in my life, having worked for very many years with very rudimentary equipment, I'd say the cinema camera that I've got now is the best camera I've ever owned. It's the most money I ever spent on a camera, and it was a very, very big investment for me. But it was that moment when I finally stepped up a gear in terms of the equipment and really saw the benefits that it can bring at a certain level, that I don't know if I could ever go back now. I've become too lazy to all of the privileges that these cameras can give you. So that's wonderful for me, but more broadly, I would just say any camera, anything that can capture images, anything that can capture video.
Yeah.
Film is such a wonderful tool, right? Because it's not only a piece of equipment that can help you make documentaries, videos, whatever it might be, but they're also just memories, you know, and they are invaluable for anyone who has, you know, moved away from a landscape, lost a family member, whatever it might be, and you've got these things, you've got these memories, you've got these images, these videos. They, you know, I'm sure there's people all around the country that say they wouldn't sell those for £1 million. It's a wonderful thing, and so I think that's why I would just say any camera, because having access to, well, having the ability to create those memories, you know, it's just something that many generations before us never had. And I think sometimes we take it for granted with phones in our pockets these days. But actually, would we ever want to go back and not have the opportunity to create these memories? I don't know. I don't know if we would.
Do you want another one?
No, I think I'm okay.
All right.
Yeah, thank you, though.
Tell me about your students, though. First of all, what do you like about teaching?
I fell into teaching accidentally, really. I definitely grew up telling myself that I'd never be a teacher, and that I'd hate to be a teacher, and I'd hate to stand up in front of people, for example, and have everyone look at you and all that kind of stuff. And then, I don't know, 8 years ago, one of the lecturers at Salford University said, "Would you like to do some classes?" And I said, "Yeah, just for a laugh. That'd be quite fun to do." And now 8 years later, I'm teaching on the course. Wow. I didn't expect to like it as much as I do. It certainly has its challenges. Don't get me wrong. It's not a walk in the park. But what probably any teacher in the country would say is that moment when you see learning take place, and you see a student who perhaps didn't have these skills before you met, or before you started talking about them in class, and then you start to see their work and you start to see them implementing these ideas and exploring these sort of processes and techniques, and they start to put these ideas together and you see them understand it. That's wonderful. And then they go out and they do amazing things on their own, and you stay in touch and you see all the films that they start to make, and that's the best thing about it, really.
Has there been a time when any of your students have, say, surprised you or inspired your work in any way?
There's one of my students a few years ago who made this excellent film about bird persecution and hunting in Malta, and he is Maltese, and so he sort of went over there and made a film, and he told me that he was inspired by my film in Georgia about the bird migration and hunting thing, and that got him thinking about bird persecution, which led him to discover this story. And then he went over there and made this excellent film over there. And we're still in touch and sort of are talking about collaborating on some future projects. And that's really nice. Cool. And so it's lovely to see students come through the system, but then you stay in touch and then you actually work with them. I went to Greece in the summer with my old PhD supervisor, and we taught a masterclass in documentary filmmaking in the mountains in Greece for 10 days. And that was wonderful because I came to the university when he was a professor and he taught me, and now we're going over there and teaching together.
Full circle.
Yeah, and passing it on, you know, and he's retired now, but he's still involved in these projects and still in teaching and still making films.
That's amazing.
And so it's lovely to see that process. And I'm in that part of my life now where I'm with some students who I can see that they're going to go forwards as well.
Yeah, and you can see it from an early period, can you?
Yeah, you can see the ones that sort of go out into the industry and are going, you know, they're going to try hard and they're determined and they're going to do some wonderful stuff. But just passing on that knowledge, even though I feel like I've got hopefully a lot of years in front of me.
Oh yeah,
it's nice to be passing that knowledge on still, training up the next generation.
That is amazing. That's amazing. So, what's been the proudest moments of your career?
The one that always comes to mind when I think about this, and it's actually got nothing to do with filmmaking. I was working on a project at the University of Leicester, and it was around natural history.
Yeah.
And so I've always tried to work on a broad range of projects, partly just because I've been lucky enough to have the opportunity to. So I worked on a project for a few years with the University of Leicester about museum collections, natural history museum collections, and how these collections, which were, collected in the early 1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s, very old, how they can be used in different ways to engage with different audiences.
Yeah.
And so we work with 6 museums across the Northwest, and we did this research project working with communities and curators and museum directors to make these collections more interesting and exciting. Anyway, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because as part of that project, I got invited to speak at Cambridge University about the project in a lecture hall in one of the sort of the oldest schools in Cambridge University.
Okay.
And I grew up in Dudley, sort of traditional sort of working class part of the country, in the Midlands, and I was the first person in my family to go to university. And the idea that path could take me to the University of Cambridge, where I felt completely out of my depths and as a complete imposter in a room full of all these academics, and give this talk about this research project that I've been working on, that was a moment when I sort of realized, oh, you know what, like if you do work hard and you've got a curiosity about life and you've got a few lucky breaks along the way and some opportunities, you can go to you have these wonderful opportunities. I never once saw in my life I'd be in that position, and so that's one of the most memorable moments of my life.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what's next for you? Are there any projects that you're excited about?
There's always potential projects. Yeah, as we're entering winter now, things tend to quieten down a little bit on the documentary front. We're in the process at the moment of putting together a shoot in Greenland.
Okay.
Making a short film in Greenland about this conservationist working out there, and we're hoping to get that off the ground to shoot next year. And we've just finished the edit on this project about golden eagle conservation, which we've been shooting for the last 2.5, 3 years. So that film is just about being finished. And as we go into the winter, I'm basically going into the edit cave now, where I've got to edit all these.
Do you find editing tiring?
Sometimes.
Do you enjoy it?
Sometimes. I think, like what you were saying earlier about that creative process, sometimes it's not enjoyable at all until you get to the end. Editing is like that. When you open up an editing project and you've just got thousands of raw images and it's all crap and everything's rubbish and then you've got to make it good. And that's hard work. And then towards the end of it, it starts to look good. And you're like, oh, you know what? This is pretty cool, actually. And you start to enjoy it. But that moment when you open it up and you look and you've got like 70 hours of footage to go through and you're like, oh my God, where do I even start? That bit is hard, but it's all part of the process.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Process. Yeah.
And it's where the hard work is, really. Anyone can live in that moment where you've got this wonderful film that's been made and all you need to do is do the final touch.
Yeah.
That's the easy bit.
That's the easy bit. The editing is always hard. Yeah.
Editing's always hard.
At this point, I just want to thank you so much for coming here and sitting down with me. It's been an amazing experience. It's been an honor. I've been a sponge just soaking up all these gems and this knowledge that you're dropping on me right now. And I know our viewers and listeners have also got so much information from this. Thank you so much for coming.
No, thank you for inviting me. It's been a wonderful conversation. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely. And how can people reach you on socials?
Yeah, I've got an Instagram page, I've got a LinkedIn page, and I've got a website. I think if anyone wants to go to my website, which is just my full name, watch some of my films that are on there, drop me an email.
Watch the films; they are amazing.
Watch
all the films.
find me on Instagram, drop me a message, and I think one of the reasons why I think this podcast is so interesting is I'll be interested to find out about all the other artists and creative you're speaking to.
Yes, definitely.
And bring us together and let's share our stories and connect.
Yes. That's the whole point of this podcast. We are trying to build an ecosystem of artists and also build an archive of voices, local voices making a global impact. Yeah, this all be great together.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. No, it's been lovely.